We will be proposing mitigation techniques for levee systems.
New Orleans was originally founded in 1718 and initially constructed on the natural high ground of the Mississippi Delta, just south of Lake Pontchartrain. The Mississippi Delta was formed over the course of thousands of years as loose sediment and silt has been deposited at the mouth of the Mississippi River leading to the Gulf of Mexico. New Orleans began experiencing rapid growth in the 1830s and 1840s, creating new issues relating to land subsidence. Many large cities like New Orleans all over the world face the issue of land subsidence today, but it is a particularly serious issue for New Orleans due to the soft ground of silt and sediment it has been built upon. With a population of approximately 370,000 people and a population density of about 842 people per square kilometer, the region is not as densely populated as several other large cities, but is still densely populated for the environment it is located in. The city has been slowly sinking over the past 200 years, but erosion of the delta and the land it sits upon has dramatically increased over the past 30 years. In May of 1995, intense flooding of a very large magnitude struck New Orleans due to prolonged heavy rain and demonstrated the weakness of the city's pump system. The pump system and other flood controls have since been upgraded tremendously, but the increased pump efficiency has led to an increase in the loss of sediment from the land under the city. Due to the construction of dams and levees, lost sediment is unable to be replenished by the Mississippi River, causing the land under New Orleans to erode at an even higher rate. When floods and hurricanes strike the city, it is virtually impossible to escape the disastrous effects anywhere in the city, but the worst of the flooding is usually concentrated along the banks of the Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain. Residents who live in these areas most often experience the most intense flooding due to their close proximity to levees, where the erosion is at its worst and consequently the elevation is at its lowest, usually below sea level. Those who live in the older parts of the city, such as the French Quarter, are in the highest areas of the city, usually above sea level, and therefore can escape the worst of the flooding.
New Orleans is a city that is mostly below sea level, lying at about 6 feet, and it is located along the banks of the Mississippi River with low lying marsh, swamps, and wetlands. Historically, New Orleans has seen the worst hurricanes and flooding that the United States has seen, causing devastation to the city whenever it is faced with any kind of natural disaster. Fun fact, but not really fun, New Orleans is predicted to be entirely underwater by 2050 due to the Mississippi River Delta disappearing. Flooding from the Mississippi River has disastrous impacts on the city of New Orleans because it is difficult to drain floodwater. Another issue is climate change. Warmer waters are causing bigger hurricanes and more precipitation because it can carry more water vapor. New Orleans is also close to the Gulf of Mexico, and this is a prime location to creating a high risk of flooding and hurricane damage. The Gulf causes coastal land loss, causing further flooding in the area, and this makes it more vulnerable to tropical cyclones. 60.7% of presidential disaster declarations that New Orleans has received has been due to tropical cyclones. Additionally, 25% of those declarations have been due to flooding. An example is the entire city flooding during Hurricane Katrina, causing massive power outages, flooding, and many other problems due to low lying grounds, creating room for the town to potentially drown. 80% of the town was flooded due to the flood walls and levee system failing. This is why it is important to have a hazard safety system installed in every city. With a better system, New Orleans is less likely to flood.
Our proposed mitigation technique is a revamp of the New Orleans levee system. The current system was rebuilt following Hurricane Katrina, which was necessary but was also almost 20 years ago. In the time since then, many new technologies and flood risk reduction strategies have been created. Despite that, many of these strategies have yet to be taken into account by the Greater New Orleans Hurricane and Storm Damage Risk Reduction System, or HSDRRS, and we propose that they start to look into more of these techniques. Here are some of the improvements that the HSDRRS could make to the New Orleans levee system. For one, they could raise and widen the existing levees. This is pretty self evident, make the levees bigger, and it'll be harder for the water to overtop them. They could also strengthen the existing levees by making stronger foundations or by replacing more of the levee construction with geosynthetic materials. Another thing they could do is to add surface sealing to areas near the levees. The diagram on here has this labeled as impermeable soil foundation, and that's what this is referring to. This will make it harder for water inside the levee to seep underground underneath the levee and come out on the other side, flooding the local area. Another important factor is the construction of berms. The HSDRRS already has berms on many of its levees, but not on all of them. Berms are a crucial factor here as they flatten the slope of the levees, which reduces erosion and creates a more gradual transition from water to levee. They also dissipate wave energy and increase the general stability of the levees. Our final suggestion would be to add woody plants on these berms. These would reduce the risk of overtopping and reduce the environmental impact that these levees would have on the natural landscape. Furthermore, the root systems of these woody plants would prevent erosion of the berms.
The levees in New Orleans have shown failure through breaching and overtopping that flood the city and cause severe damage seen in 1915, 1947, 1965, and most commonly with Hurricane Katrina in 2005. But New Orleans still hasn't taken action to prevent it. The Army Corps of Engineers wrote an emphasis in 2019 on the need for improvement of levees by the year 2023, which is concerning, speaking it's 2024 and still no improvements. This is why we're heavily proposing these mitigation techniques to combat the changes in the world of techniques, material, technology, and the physical world around us. For example, in New Orleans, the levees are in need to be raised and widened due to the levees settling into the soft soils, which have resulted in the height dropping while the sea levels are rising in New Orleans. This makes the region prone to potential storm surge flooding from overtopping of levees that would flood New Orleans. These issues are becoming more prominent and need attention for fixation before the next big hurricane or storm surge comes to flood New Orleans once again. There is a $3.7 billion proposed plan currently that includes 7.5 miles of construction of levees, floodwalls, and pump stations. However, we're implementing more techniques over a vast region of levees that include up to 350 miles, which costs are expected to be higher due to more coverage of all levees in New Orleans. It will be costly to the community, but will be beneficial to New Orleans to prevent future flooding destructions that would cost more in turn than just revamping the levees through our proposed mitigation techniques. Hurricane Katrina, which flooded about 80% of New Orleans, was caused due to levee failure that costed the city roughly $125 billion in damage. However, although the costs are outstanding for the region, by having improved and up-to-date levee systems, the cost to improve levees would be a fraction of the cost of damage that could occur if mitigation techniques are not taken into precaution.
A levee is an embankment which is built to prevent the overflow of a river. Levees are designed to reduce flood risk from happening from flooding events. However, they do not eliminate the risk completely. The main goal of a levee is not only to make the river steeper, but also to protect the cities and the people living in them from overflow of the water. Levees always occur in the lower part of a river. There's also a levee in all of the 50 states, and there's one in just about every single large river in all of those states. For example, like the Mississippi River. The main one in Texas is called the Texas City Hurricane Flood Protection Levee, which is located in Galveston County. Mississippi actually holds the record for having the most levees. All the levees in Mississippi total in over 3,500 miles. One of them is just 1,000 miles long just by itself, which is along the Mississippi River. Levees are not only in the United States. There is an estimated 9,000 kilometers total of levees just in England. Levees were actually originated over 3,000 years ago in ancient Egypt, originally along the Nile River. There are two types of levees that are commonly used in the United States. Those are artificial and natural. Artificial levees will prevent flooding of the countryside and they confine the flow of the river, which will then result in a higher and a faster water flow. The next type occurs when a flood flows over its banks. The water will spread out and then slow down, which will then lead to it depositing the load of sediment. Over time, the river's banks are built up above the level of the rest of the floodplain, which those resulting ridges are then called natural levees.
And this is our reference page.